it's now close to 6,000 or 7,000 or something, have completed the 10 steps. They have reduced emissions for about 500 London to Copenhagen flights, Copenhagen-London flights, right? So the equivalent of 500 flights is taken out of the air. Now, you can be critical and say, well, that's nothing in the bigger scheme of things, but it's a start, right? And we have now finally seen passengers buying biofuel. Before we launched Conscious Traveler, it was fewer than 0.5% of people who bought biofuel by themselves, and now it's between 1.5% and 2%. Still low, but it's going up.
Welcome to Sustainability in the Air, the world's first podcast dedicated to sustainable aviation. I'm your host, Shashank Nigam, the CEO of Simplifying. Every Thursday, I have important conversations with top aviation executives, technology entrepreneurs, and policymakers helping aviation take climate action. Conversations that help separate the signal from the noise. Whether you are a frequent flyer or an airline executive, if you care about sustainability or simply love traveling, welcome aboard. My guest today is Anko van der Werff. Anko is the president and CEO at SAS Scandinavian Airlines. In the last couple of years, Anko has led the successful turnaround of the airline, making sure that it emerges from bankruptcy, included its new alliance with Air France KLM, the airline joining the SkyTeam Alliance and leaving Star Alliance, and leaving a trail in the sustainability side of things with first electric aircraft flights announced in the world in 2028 with Heart Aerospace aircraft. Anko is a seasoned CEO, having previously been the CEO of Avianca Airlines in Colombia and leading its own turnaround. Previously, he has worked with Aeromexico, Qatar Airways, and KLM. He and I really geek out about what it takes to not just turn airlines around, which seems to be something he truly enjoys, but also what it will take to make flying sustainable. Please enjoy this interview with Anko, which I'm doing in coordination with SAS Scandinavian joining the SkyTeam Alliance. Anko, you have been on a roller coaster ride since you joined SAS, coming out of bankruptcy, new owners, joining SkyTeam. How has it been for you?
Yeah. When you put it like that, it's indeed it's a lot to take in, right? It's been an exciting journey, I have to say. It's now summer 24, but even think about it. Just go back 3 years in time when I started. I started in July, August 2021. The Delta variant was still here. I was not allowed to travel to Norway. Norway was closed as a country. Just a few months after I get here, there's Omicron. Russian airspace closes 6 months after I join. I mean, these are things that we almost forget by now, right? We've forgotten almost what COVID was like. But I joined really when all of that was still in place. And so, yeah, a lot of things have happened. Wouldn't have missed it for the world. Really great now team. Very happy with everybody here around me. This is, it's an exciting journey.
Now, this is not the first time you have been the CEO of an airline. This is not the first time you've been hired to turn around an airline, but this is the first time you're in such a climate-aware country or region. How have things been different in Sweden, in Denmark, in Norway, in Scandinavia, compared to your previous stints running airlines in different parts of the world?
Yeah, that's a great question, Shashank. And honestly, I'm glad that you start with it, because let's take a minute on this. Scandinavia is truly different. I can say this, I'm objective. I'm not a Scandinavian by birth. We live here now. We're just started our 4th year, and I've done 4 years once before 15 years ago. And already 15 years ago when we got here, almost 20 years ago when we got here first, you notice that it's in their DNA. They live so much more with outdoors. They're so much more respectful of outdoors than I think anywhere that I've seen, at least where I've lived. And maybe Canada comes close, right? But I think here truly there is something different. I remember 20 years ago, I was working for a different airline, Air France KLM. We can, of course, talk about them as well in different ways. And I was a regional manager for some countries here. And I remember that we had to produce an annual sustainability report, corporate sustainability report for the corporates that wanted to fly with us. And if we didn't produce such a report, then those corporate accounts could simply no longer fly with us. And we went to head office in Paris and Amsterdam. We said, well, look, guys, we need this report. And there wasn't one. And so that tells you again that even forward-thinking, forward-looking, very conscious airlines such as Air France KLM, who've always been on the forefront as well, right? Apart from SAS, I think they are some of the airlines that are, really at the forefront of driving sustainability in aviation. That 20 years ago they weren't, when Scandinavia already was as a society. Heat pumps, how do you, cluster heating, what has been developed already in the 90s, it's now being transported to the Netherlands or is being implemented in the Netherlands. And, right, mature countries, high GDP, but the Netherlands is only doing that now, literally probably 25, 30 years after, for instance, Sweden did it. It is truly unique, that minimalistic style that you have in both, call it clothing and architecture, it just transpires into everything that they do. Why would you waste? Why would you use something that you don't have to use? And so the whole thinking of Scandinavia is already different. And of course, therefore, that has its implications on flying. Now, here's the thing, though. When you look at the countries themselves and just look at the geography of these countries, both Norway and Sweden are very elongated countries, right? Big countries, big land masses. And then Norway, on top of that, has fjords and mountains. So aviation is a part of society. It's not looked upon as I don't know. It's a need. Maybe put it positively.
The region needs it. Its connectivity is essential.
Yeah. And when you look at a smaller country like Denmark, then you get to another, I think, dimension to all of this, other different dynamics, which is that the small country also needs that connectivity and cannot rely maybe necessarily on bigger brothers or not, but friends, right, that are adjacent to it. So you have Denmark, which really is looking for that connectivity as a smaller country. A big economy which punches above its weight as well. I mean, think of Novo Nordisk and Maersk and Lego and all these brands that, of course, you have in Denmark. And then there's these elongated countries, Sweden, big economy with tons of corporates, right, that, of course, need the connectivity for business. But also when you go to the north of Sweden or to the north of Norway, the first thing those businesses always ask is can you put in more flights, right? They want to be connected. Case in point, for instance, the Ice Hotel in Kiruna or visit Lapland, visit right north of Sweden. They very much are aware that their lifeline to the world is, of course, aviation.
I hear you about the connectivity. I hear you about the lifelines. But when you were leading airlines like Avianca or in senior leadership roles at Aeromexico or Qatar Airways, connectivity was still an important argument. Connecting Tijuana to Mexico City or to Toluca or, Acapulco is just as important as you're connecting Copenhagen to Trondheim, for example. But what's different about running SAS Scandinavian than some of these other airlines you have worked with when it comes to this sustainability and environmental consciousness coming through the fabric of the airline? Is this a pressure you feel, or is this a responsibility? What's different?
Yeah, it's both, but it is a responsibility because there is that pressure from society in the first place, right? So when you are separating your waste already for decades, then right, you go on to the next thing. When already you think about not purchasing things that you don't need and a minimalistic behavior, when you are confronted with the outdoors and with climate, and not just climate change, but climate as a whole, right? I mean, for 9 months of the year, it's dark here, and for 7 months of the year, it's simply too cold. And so people really live with nature the whole time, and therefore every single one of our employees, basically, right, all of the Scandinavians, which is, of course, 90% of our workforce, it's it's different, Shashank, because in the Middle East, people were, and I believe are, still in a way nation building, right? They are a business card to the nations that they have, and whether it's some bigger ones like Saudi or some smaller ones like Qatar, right? Smaller or bigger in terms of landmass. It is a business card to the country, and therefore that connectivity and that lifeline is important to them. But that sustainability is just not ingrained. Here it is connectivity plus sustainability, and it's that trade-off again, right? They are, yeah, this sounds stupid, but they're wired differently because they take it into consideration in all of their decision-making processes. It is because that's how I think they look at the climate on a day-to-day basis as well, right? I mean, when you and I go out, and well, you're now living somewhere else, I'm not sure whether it's public, but you'll see plenty of snow over the next half year, right?
Absolutely. Boston gets lots of snow.
Boston gets lots of snow. Now, of course, you were living in Canada before, right? Or you have been at some point. So you know what it's like. And then you were living in London, and everybody always complains about rain in London, but it's different to just be wet for maybe an hour or two than snowed into a car. And so, right, if you're snowed into a car in Canada or in the north of Sweden, then no one's there to help you because it's very remote. I think that's how they reason. They think about climate and they think about the outdoors differently than most of us. I think that's just where it's coming from. And they have completely ingrained it into business life, and into many of the different businesses that they run, right? Forestry, of course, is big here. How does that work? Steel production, right? There is H2O green steel, right? So green hydrogen, how can that fit in? It's quite remarkable that all of those things are in Scandinavia and not yet anywhere else in the world.
Right. It's so fascinating because then this need to be one with nature, one with the environment, transpires into everything you do as a business. So I know that SAS Scandinavian has set a target to reduce emissions by 25% by 2025 compared to 2005 level. Yet you are growing. How do you continue growing as a business and sustain the business while being sustainable and reduce emissions by 20%? How do you do that?
Yeah. Now, the biggest chunk was obviously new fleet, right? So from 2005 to 2025, look, if you look at, okay, great example, maybe again, we were the first, and we are in percentages the biggest A320 operator, right? Out of our total fleet, we have already this summer, we had call it 75 Neos operating out of the 85 320 families that we have, and so fleet renewal absolutely number one, right? Efficient operations is what every airline always wants, right? But just run it better, run it smoother, be on time, make sure that you don't waste all these things that you can just do yourselves. But what I think is slightly different here again is you have a massive support from companies. So there is a corporate sustainability program where they purchase sustainable aviation fuel. There is a higher blend-in mandate from our governments than anywhere else in the world. I still believe that Sweden is number one in the world. 1.6, 1.7% of fuel needs to be blended in, and then gradually that goes up over time. Others are now following suit, but some markets are only at 0.5%, right? And Sweden is already leading that way. And so there is a drive from the government, but there's certainly also, I don't know whether it's called moral support or voluntary, at least, support from many of our corporates. And the same way, sustainable aviation fuel that's purchased, of course, by individuals. Now, that's still low, but what we have seen, we launched a conscious traveler program 6 months ago, 9 months ago, and we do see an uptick there, right? We do see people following the program and purchasing biofuel, sustainable aviation fuel themselves as well.
So tell us a bit more about this conscious traveler program. This is with Eurobonus, and it's to incentivize more sustainable travel choices, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think first of all, it really aims to, I don't know, educating is such a big word, right? But it tries to explain, educate between us here, passengers on what is sustainable travel in a way. And you start really basic. You can get points by looking at videos about what is sustainable aviation fuel in the first place, right? So I think a lot of our passengers have heard about it, but they really don't know what it is. Okay, so you can watch a video about sustainable aviation fuel, the production of it, distribution of it, how does it get into an aircraft, but also the challenges around it, right? How can we as an industry produce more or get more to be produced? And then right price points to change over time. Okay, perfect. Just by looking at those videos, you earn points. And then there is buying biofuel gets you to earn points. You can, of course, give your Euro bonus points to, for instance, projects such as biofuel, but other charities as well. There is one that I particularly like. There's lots of flights where we provide food, but people simply have just had lunch or dinner, whatever it is. And so deselect, right? Opt out of your food. And since we've done that, in the first months that we did that, immediately between 6 to 8% of our people knew it. We, of course, have communicated it, but not too broadly. But 6 to 8% of our passengers here opted out in the first month that we rolled that out. So that's 6 to 8% of produced food waste. Those are all things that we're doing and where we're asking our demand side, our passengers, to help us out. And I think that's great because it cannot just come from governments or companies. I really am a firm believer, and I've been really vocal about driving this within the company. I really do want that demand side to be with us, and that Conscious Traveler program is great. Look, we have so far, I think it's now almost 100,000 people that have taken a step. It's 10 steps. They've taken a step, right? So some of them have only just, of course, one, and then I can't recall the number, but I think it's now close to 6,000 or 7,000 or something have completed the 10 steps. Altogether, wow. They have reduced emissions for about 500 London to Copenhagen flights, Copenhagen-London flights. Right, so the equivalent of 500 flights is taken out of the air. Now, that's right. Good. You can be critical and say, well, that's nothing on a bigger scheme, in a bigger scheme of things, but it's a start, right? And we have now finally seen passengers buying biofuel. Before we launched Conscious Traveler, it was fewer than 0.5% of people who bought biofuel by themselves, and now it's between 1.5% and 2%. Still low, but it's going up.
But it's growing.
Only a few months ago. It's growing, and again, it's recent. It's fairly new to the program.
One quick clarification angle. If I, as a traveler, complete the 10 steps, what do I get? Do I get a lot of miles? What is my incentive there if I do all the 10 steps?
Yeah, you get, well, first of all, you get from us, you get call it awards, a digital award. It says, okay, you're now a conscious traveler. We have rewarded you indeed by giving you more miles, more Eurobonus points, right? They're points, not miles in our system. It's fine. Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's something that I think here people feel already good about, that they can show and tell others about, I know what sustainable fuel is. I have bought sustainable fuel. I'm buying sustainable fuel. I'm being part of a corporate sustainability program. I've moved my company to buy part of our or full sustainable aviation fuel with SAS for our corporate trips. We are opting out of food when we don't want it, etc., etc., etc. Right? So there's all these things where people themselves can already help.
It's so interesting. There are two things that stand out to me. One is the fact that they're educated about this. It's not just buying and you don't know what you're buying. You're fully educated and you can talk about it. You're empowering them to talk about this. The second is, I like this gamification aspect of it. It might seem gimmicky, but it allows people to continue to grow. And I wonder what sort of feedback you're getting on this gamification, because it reminds me of what City of Copenhagen is doing with its green loyalty program, where you can clean up some litter and get a free museum guided tour, right?
Yes. And there's no money in there, but there is, you get something, you get discounts, or indeed in Copenhagen, you get discounts in a museum or something. But it also, we have seen it again now, and it's great that you refer to that Copenhagen a test that they ran, which, by the sound of it, I've spoken to some people also in Denmark, was quite successful. But the main reason that it was successful is it bonds people again, right? It makes people believe in we're contributing, we're doing something ourselves, and not just looking at some impersonal entity, some whoever far away, distant show who say, well, we're going to do X. No, we're contributing ourselves, right? Here is something that we can do ourselves. And that was something that I've always been struggling with. Again, before we did any of this, fewer than 0.5% of our people, passengers, bought biofuel. It was 0.2, 0.3. If you were lucky, we did a campaign, we gave some extra points, fine. We got maybe up to 0.5%. But through this program, we've now more than tripled it in, call it the space of 6 months, right? That's really good, right? It's nice. Low base, low numbers, I get it. But hey, 500 flights, the equivalent of 500 flights of CO2 that we've taken out. The gamification, I think, has been key. It's fun. It's 10 steps. It's digestible. You can oversee 10 steps. You know what they are. You can talk about it with your friends, and you can hopefully show off a bit with it, right? So I took the 10 steps. I know I'm not going to go through the list again, but I know all these things, and here's what I've done. It's, it's fun.
See, there were two aspects you touched upon earlier. One was the Eurobonus Conscious Traveler program. The other was the highest percentage of A320neos. Let's dig in a little bit more into that. I know you are flying some of these neos transatlantic now. What are the economics on this? How much does a neo transatlantic flight, how does that differ in terms of emissions versus a traditional on an A330 flight, same route?
Yeah, so there we have to be a bit specific because that's not the neos, but that's the long ranges, right? The 321 long ranges. So narrow body,
the narrow body, yes.
The narrow is exactly over the ocean. That's about 40% fuel saving versus a 330. So 40%, very good. The beauty is that you also feel less pressure in your revenue management environment to start discounting for the heck of it, right? Just to make sure that these aircraft fill up. And that's one of the things in Scandinavia. We have 25 million people living in Scandinavia, but they really live all over the place. It's not like Mexico City, which is one city of 25 million people. We've got 25 million people, but they live over 3 countries that are really big, right? Again, Norway and Sweden are big land masses. So
it reminds me of Canada together.
Yeah. Well, think about it, right? Exactly. West Coast, East Coast, Canada. That's a big country, and so the 321 LRs fulfill a role. They can be deployed, and I do think that over time they can really be successfully deployed. Once we, for instance, have our partnership on the United States side with Delta ramped up more, where you can fly secondary cities in Scandinavia to tap into the United States hubs of Delta, where with a wide body, you wouldn't do it. But clearly the capital risk of such a machine, of a narrow body here, of a 321 LR, is much lower. And the commercial risk of needing to fill it is also very different from a wide body.
Right. I love how you explain it from a commercial angle as well. It's easier on the commercial teams to fill these planes up, narrow bodies, rather than just the wide body. Still sticking to airplanes, I think you did something that was full of guts and what most airline CEOs would almost term it as risky, which is you announced and sold a fully electric flight 5 years before the plane flew. In 2023, you sold seats on an electric flight for 2028. Firstly, I do not know any airline that sells tickets 5 years in advance, and I do not know anyone who buys tickets 5 years in advance. Yet, you sold out those flights, to be specific, on the Heart Aerospace ES 30 program. Tell us about
in nanoseconds. We thought, okay, and credit to the team here. This really, what I've been pushing was we need to develop a menu set, a 3, 4, 5 different options to get the demand side to work with us on sustainability. That was really my assignment. And so what was clear was that, for instance, At the beginning, biofuel, which you can buy in portions in increments of 20 minutes on our website, it wasn't incentivized by your bonus points. So if you would buy it as an ancillary, which you can on our website, in our app, or whatever, you wouldn't get your bonus points. And so I said, well, that's an easy one, right? Then we went into all the elements of the Conscious Traveler program. But everywhere I go, certainly where I went over the last years, and you ask people, okay, who cares about the planet? Yes, we do. Okay, great. Well, who flies? Yes, we do. Okay, great. Who flies with SAS? Well, depending on where I go in the world, everybody's like, yes. Okay, great. Cool. How many of you are buying biofuel? And the hands were pretty much down, right? No one ever bought it. So then we came back here. We thought we need to develop something on how are we going to get traction on the demand side. Conscious Traveler was one. Big success so far. But electrical flight, a lot of people within, I have to stand corrected, but I think it was 7,000 people within, we closed it after like 15 minutes or something, 10 minutes.
Yeah, it was gone by the time I logged on the website. It was gone. I had put it in my calendar.
Yeah, we had 100. I can't recall, but we had 100 seats, and they were literally gone within a second. Within a second, we had 100 people or something. Right? Okay, done. And so the critics said, "Well, it's a marketing gimmick." It really isn't. Of course, we got to make sure that there is that flights. Of course, we got to work with hearts. Of course, we got to make sure. But we're doing all of that things. What was really important to us was we want to put stuff out there that make people excited about what's coming, and not just this doom and gloom, or it's all you got to pay more or whatever. No, this is an exciting thing. Who wants to be part of the future? And so, great fun. Credit to the team. They came up with that idea, and I think it worked.
So selling the flight is one thing. Buying and investing in this all-electric aircraft is another. Why are you so bullish about electric, especially from a SAS Scandinavian fleet perspective?
Yeah, it's interesting. I had lunch with the CEO of Heart Aerospace. He was here in my office. Anders, and I just keep on being excited about it. Look, for all records, we're excited about three things: SAF, eSAF. We have to do something that will be, they call it lifeline of sustainability for years to come. Then there is electrical, and then there is hydrogen. And we're investing our time and where we can, some of our money, in all three, right? So those are the three pillars that really are important. SAF, there is something here today. It's too expensive. We need to make sure collectively, as an industry, as countries, as society, that the production goes up and that the price comes down. You cannot do that through livestock, feedstock. So it's got to come from eSAF. Okay, so, right, SAF, eSAF. Lots of time that we're spending. Yesterday, I had a field trip. I'm the chairman of the Danish Climate Partnership between government, aviation, and suppliers, let's say. And look, there's an eSAF project right now, which people find it very hard to find investors for, because the end product will be 8 times more expensive than fossil fuel, right? So, darn, how do we fix this? How do we solve it? Because, of course, no way that I, as a CEO, or that the board will allow me even to purchase eSAF now for 8 times the price of fossil fuel, right? Any airline will go bust. But great, there is a technological solution to how eSAF can be produced. Beautiful. Okay, so at least technologically it's possible. How do we then fix it? How do you create an industry that scales up and that produces the volumes that we all need, that brings the price down to then be able to? Okay, so that's at least solving mode. It's not so much technologically impossible. Then we get to electrical. So I think that's a 5 to 10 year project, and then we'll get into hydrogen in a second, right? So electrical aviation, the reasons for still being excited about it, there is tons of airports that are currently unequipped for bigger aircraft, where you are talking remote areas where there could be a use, and it could be ambulances, and it can be some cargo, and of course, at some point, it can also be passengers that you can unlock. Currently, the smallest aircraft that we're having is, call it the 75 seaters, ATRs, right? And that's the smallest that we in a way operate. So I continue my conversations with Hart to say, look, we need something bigger. They're working on a 30 seater. And again, you can be critical and say, well, it's a 30 seater. It doesn't fit the SAS network. And it's a start. It's the same as with SAF, right? At least I'm happy and I'm truly, truly excited about it. Because if Anders and the team crack the code on having an electric aircraft out there in a number of years that flies for a few hundred kilometers on full electric or double the kilometers on hybrid, then at least we've proven that it works. And then we got to scale up production of those aircraft. And then we got to stretch the aircraft to 50 seaters and then to 100 seaters. And you got to build a range and you got to improve on technology for the batteries and everything that we've gone through again today. But someone's got to start. And that's what I like about that team. And then you've got hydrogen. I think still questions around the technology itself. And can you fit the technology then into aircraft? That is something that we're working with, or we're contributing with, I should say, with Airbus. It's always a pleasure really to listen to Guillaume Faury, right, CEO of Airbus, because they're really thinking about how to do this. Okay, they're smarter than we are. We don't build aircraft. Let them do it. What we can do together with them is think, how do you bring green hydrogen at some point, if we can produce that in the volumes also that we need? How do we bring that from the seashore, right, North Sea of Denmark, for instance, right off the coast of Denmark? How do you bring it on land, and how do you then bring it to an airport, and how do you get it into wing? That is something that we're also spending again our time and money on in a joint studies. So those are the three things that we're doing: SAF, eSAF, electric, and hydrogen. Someone needs to crack the code, and I'm happy that people are working on that.
Fantastic. You mentioned briefly the Danish Climate Partnership that you're the chairperson for. How does that help what you're doing at the airline?
Yeah, in a way, I'm not even sure whether it should help the airline, because I'm independent in a way from the airline. Of course, I got the position because I'm at SAS, right? But what we're trying to do is the following, and this is something that we're going to speak to the government about. So it depends a bit on when we air this, Shank. But we have in Denmark, there is a passenger departure tax. Okay, part of that money is earmarked for a green fund that the Climate Partnership has been tasked with, or asked to give their opinion on to the government. What do we do with that money? Fine, that's, I think, a somewhat more justified way of having at least some form of a tax on aviation than many of the other taxes I've seen, right? If it's just for the sake of taxation, we'll have some questions there. But when at least part of that money flows back to, and let's use that fund to set up, for instance, SAF or eSAF production, right? And that's where we went to yesterday. We went to a facility where they are trying to produce, not even trying, they're producing SAF, and they're trying to think of how can we produce eSAF in the volumes that we need, and how do we then get it into it? Okay, everything we spoke about. What we can do with the Climate Partnership is say, okay, here is how we would spend that money. What do we spend it on for the entire industry? And how do we think that over the next few years we can build this into an industry that can stand on its own feet? Maybe now it needs subsidies, it needs funding, it needs part of that taxation to go here, but we need to top it up with maybe more government money, whatever. These are recommendations to build facilities and to get more SAF, eSAF, etc. in, and that in the end will benefit society, but it will also then benefit airlines, not just SAS, but of course SAS as well.
Fantastic. I love the entire ecosystem aspect of it. So we talked about SAF, we talked about hydrogen, electric. What about offsetting? Where do you see the role of carbon offsetting? And I believe you're moving away from it. Why?
Yeah, we're moving away from it because we have no confidence. And this is again where I think Scandinavia as a whole is just ahead of the curve. I remember I think it was almost 3 years ago in 2021, we had the IATA meeting in Boston, and we were having discussions already back then in my management team here. I just started, and the management team was convinced offsetting is greenwashing, because that's how the entire nations here look at it. Scandinavia looks at offsetting as greenwashing. It is not real. It is in the end not driving anything to zero. If those projects are real in some parts of the world where you find it hard to check and you really don't have the resources to really know what's going on, then it's offsetting. It's not driving to zero. And so we've made a very conscious decision to end all of that and to move towards to put our eggs in the baskets that really will drive a difference: SAF, eSAF, electrical, and hydrogen.
It's just so important to be in tune and in line with the environment you operate in. One of the big changes that is happening, Anko, is you becoming part of the Air France KLM family of airlines, as well as joining SkyTeam. How do you see that impacting not just your business, but also your sustainability efforts?
Yeah. I want to make one and have to make one legal remark. Air France KLM will be a 19.9% owner. And with that, there is no controlling stake, right? So we're still separate entities. But I know what you mean. And yes, that's all true. And so we're going to get closer to at least Air France KLM. And yes, we're going to enter into SkyTeam in September, in this month. When I look at already who is buying most SAF in the world as a percentage, then Air France, KLM, and us are number 1 and 2. So I think it's great to see that the number 1 and 2 airlines in the world are teaming up. And we, of course, can share information on how do we see this, what kind of projects could we potentially invest in together, how do we grow this, right? How do we grow the production of SAF so that the cost of it comes down? That's one. I do think that the extended family, when I looked at Virgin last year with their flight, their transatlantic flight, but certainly Delta, Amelia De Luca doing a great job in Delta. What can we do together? And I think these are very forward-looking airlines. There is a few others in the world, but I do think that Air France, KLM, Delta are a very good match for SAS. And in all still objectivity, I think given what I've explained, given how society here works and how society believes and thinks about sustainability, I do think that in many areas we are, as Scandinavia, I will not say SAS, but as Scandinavia, we are the gold standard. And I think therefore Air France, KLM and Delta are a very great match for us as well. And I think we've got a lot to contribute, and hopefully we can also learn a lot from them.
Looking forward, Anko, what do you see as the biggest challenges and opportunities for SAS Scandinavian in achieving its sustainability goals while remaining competitive as well? You've got a business to turn around and to look after as well, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think you nailed it. That's of course the major challenge. Look, once again, if yesterday we do the math with people who are far smarter than I am, and we're going through SAF, eSAF, the volumes, the price points that are needed, the price points, first of all, of energy that goes into, right, creating all of it. And you come out with, well, everything is between 3, 5, or even 8 times more expensive, then that is the major challenge, right? So I think that's my view anyway. Let's be very pragmatic, very practical. Let's take some of these funds that we have access to, and let's try and create as much bang for our buck. Let's try and create projects that really do generate as much volume as we can to hopefully stimulate the creation of an industry. And that's the same way we're looking at Heart Aerospace, right? Heart, I think, a great example. SpaceX, there's many things to say and whatever, but just look at how SpaceX has innovated over the last years to something that, we have to be honest, other companies have tried, other government institutions have tried, and they have lost more money, and SpaceX has done something now far quicker and cheaper than anyone else has ever tried. Imagine that we just change the rules of the game a bit and allow Heart to build something. And it doesn't need to be Heart Aerospace, right? I mean, but Heart, of course, is the one that we're very close to. But allowing someone to build something new in a different way and then have a different regulatory view on it. This industry is an industry of safety, so that's paramount. We'll never jeopardize on that. But you can think about it differently, because look at what SpaceX has done. It is now very safe. It is cheaper. It is faster. Can we build something similar differently and therewith have different production and help, in the end, all airlines and help society? That's really how we look at it. But in the end, the price points where they stand today, that's a major challenge.
Right. I love the fact that you see your role as a catalyst in this innovation journey around sustainability. And congratulations on taking the first step, supporting upstarts like Heart Aerospace and ESAF. And I think just being in the environment you're in Scandinavia helps a lot. I really appreciate it. Anko, the final part of this interview is what I call the rapid fire round, in which we get to know you a bit more personally. And it's simple. I'll ask you one question and you can give me the first answer that comes to your mind. So, for example, what's your favorite book?
My favorite book is Foucault's Pendulum, I think it's called in English. The Pendulum of Foucault, Foucault's Pendulum. It's a book by Umberto Eco, Italian writer, written in the 1980s, 90s, 80s, I think. Fantastic journey through time, conspiracy theory, but then it basically was the template for Dan Brown, and Dan Brown made a very commercialized version with the Da Vinci Code. This is the real one.
Wow. Okay. I had no idea. I'm going to check it out. Thank you.
Yeah.
Favorite movie?
Back to the Future Part 2.
Okay. Favorite airline, one that you have not worked for?
Oof. One that I've not worked for. Ooh, it's a tough one. Well, look, I'm going to give credit to Tim Clark. For the IATA meeting, we flew to, of course, it was in Dubai this year. And I have to say, first class Emirates, it was a pleasure to fly for once. Lots of things, whatever, but Tim, very appreciated. It was a great flying experience, I have to say.
I love it. Favorite city?
At least probably 2 or 3 that come to mind. Tokyo. You know what? Let me go for Siena. I've just been in Siena. I was there a month ago. I was there for a week. It is such a stunning place. Medieval town. You really feel like you're
back in time.
Living back in time, right? 500, 600, 700 years ago. Stunning. Siena, Florence, Rome, and then Tokyo. Favorite cities.
Wow, amazing. What is something you would like to learn, Anko?
It's dangerous to put this in a podcast, Shashank. Well, look, I would like to have some singing classes. I don't sing. I'm horrible at karaoke or whatever, but it would be fun, I think, to be really good at singing. That must be special. Yeah.
Fantastic. I love to sing, and I've never had singing classes. Maybe we can go give that a shot sometime in a karaoke place where no one's listening.
Give me a few classes first. You I want to protect you.
Okay, then what is it that you do in your free time, if not singing?
Yeah, if not singing. Yeah, lots of sports. It's a boring answers, but family, sports, reading, and really the last few years, favorite sports. Tennis and football, European football, real football.
The real football.
Yeah, still play. We still play. I've everywhere I've gone, every airline that I work for, I've always played football. We always do it with part of the team. Now in SAS, it's indoors because it's not great weather for many months of the year. So we have a big sports hall here. We play football every Tuesday afternoon. Football is great. Football is that's mindfulness for me.
Wow, love it. Final 2 questions. What is the best advice you've received, Anko?
There's been so much, right? And so many people have always really generously given their time. And certainly for career decisions, for instance, I'm very fortunate. I can always call certain people, and the more you learn in life, and the more I've done, the more people you're exposed to, and then you can ask them real questions about beautiful things. And always very generous with their time. So lots of things, but one that maybe now comes to mind is certainly earlier on in my career, one of my mentors always said, don't look at the job that's now being offered to you, but look at the one that comes after it, right? Because you're still young, you're still developing. And I think you can deploy that to a lot of things. Don't look at what now maybe is in front of you, but will whatever you're spending time on now, and will whatever step you make today or tomorrow, what does it lead to beyond it? Right? What is truly out there where you can make a difference? And that was, good advice. Just great advice.
Brilliant. On that note, I think I see you are already applying this advice to what you're doing at SAS Scandinavian, looking beyond your time here, next decade, next couple of decades, till 2050 and beyond, on what is the impact your tenure as CEO will have on the future of the airline and aviation in general in the region. Congratulations on all the great work done. I love the progress. Congratulations on joining the Sky Team Alliance. And I look forward to meeting you in person very soon.
We'll see you very soon. Thanks for today. Good to meet you, and see you in Copenhagen very soon.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Sustainability in the Air. Aviation is one of the hardest to decarbonize industries, yet there are multiple paths to get to net zero. Awareness is key to a green future. So please give us your support to help our sustainable aviation insights reach a wider audience. You can do this by sharing this episode on your network, on LinkedIn, Twitter, or even WhatsApp. Or perhaps you might consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to this episode. You can start a conversation with us by writing to us at podcast@simpliflying, that's simply with an i.com. And for more content on sustainable aviation, please visit our website green.simplifying.com and join the movement. Sustainability in the Air is an original podcast by Simplifying. The show is produced by Juraj Torf in Slovakia. Dirk Singer is our Director of Sustainability, who leads research for each interviewee out of Greenwich, UK. Shubhadeep Pal is our supervising editor based out of Mumbai and Singapore. The articles are written by Ayushi Badola in Dehradun in India and Mira Hull in Montreal, Quebec. Creative design is led by Ligia Esteve in Montreal. Baiba Driman is the project director for the show based out of Valencia, Spain. Special thanks to Wendy Sim in Singapore. And I'm Shashank Nigam, the CEO of Simplifying and your host. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn.